It seems like most video games these days are incredibly long, and they demand an ever-increasing amount of free time from their players. Whether that's because their open world stretches them out to be several tens of hours long, or they're one of the many live service titles out there. The sheer length of most titles these days means a lot of people will likely only get to play 2 or 3 a year if they're lucky. That doesn't mean that there aren't any shorter stories out there that are worth your time though. And especially in the world of indie gaming, there are plenty of delicious, bite-sized morsels that are just as affecting, if not more so, than the massive AAA experiences that we've become used to. For this list, we've gathered just a handful of games that will, on average, take less than 5 hours to complete, but still manage to pack their short runtimes with plenty of emotional intensity. I'm Ashton from TripleJump, and here are 10 short games with incredibly impactful stories. Number 10. Dear Esther. A story doesn't necessarily have to have a definitive conclusion to be memorable. In fact, sometimes an ending that's up to interpretation can stick with the player more than one with a decisive final solution. Despite appearances suggesting that it might be one of the most walking simulators to ever walking simulate, Dear Esther is one such example of this phenomenon, and manages to craft an intriguing and thoughtful tale without a clear-cut ending. On the surface, Dear Esther is about a man exploring the Hebrides while reading a series of letters he wrote to his now deceased wife, the titular Esther. However, the more he explores, and crucially, the more he discovers himself, the more that is revealed to him. At first, this is just little glimpses into their life together, along with bits of history of the island and its other inhabitants. Eventually, though, bigger things are brought into question, like the exact nature of Esther's death. On top of this, there are strange images and visions that will appear as well. And by the end of the game, players are free to interpret the revelations in the way they think is most satisfying. Or least satisfying. I suppose it depends on how optimistic you're feeling at the time. Number 9. The Gardens Between. A story doesn't necessarily have to have any dialogue in it to be memorable either. And no, don't worry, I won't be doing that every time. Anyway, The Gardens Between does all of its heavy narrative lifting for its themed puzzles as opposed to its dialogue, which is impressive enough on its own, but perhaps even more so given how little time it takes to play through. The game tells the tale of 2 friends, Arena and Freund, who have lived next to each other for many years and have spent much of their time playing in the space between the 2 homes. As the game opens, they're meeting in their treehouse hideout, and players will follow them as they puzzle their way through a series of, puzzles. Each set of brain teasers represents a specific time in their lives, and a memory that the 2 of them share with one another. Once a sequence is completed, players will be treated to a flashback showing what really happened, allowing them to relive the memories alongside the friends. Ultimately, The Gardens Between manages to be both an intriguing puzzle experience and a heartfelt exploration of childhood friendship, all in a neat little package. What more could you ask for? Number 8. Valiant Hearts: The Great War. Most games about war are of the shooter variety, plonking players right into the fight and having them take part in iconic battles. You might be fooled into thinking that Valiant Hearts: The Great War will take a slightly lighter approach to the subject matter based on its lack of grey-brown and sparse combat, but you would be absolutely wrong. Releasing 100 years after the real World War I, the piecemeal story is told from the perspective of several different characters, who will occasionally encounter each other throughout. With the help of their trusty dog companion Walt and their own unique abilities, they're able to both solve puzzles and sneak through guarded areas as they try to survive the conflict outside. War isn't all fun and games though, obviously. So on occasion there will be chase sequences and intense segments that require dodging gunfire, which ramp up the tension effectively and show the juxtaposition of experiences one can have during wartime. All in all, Valiant Hearts is perhaps one of the most emotional narratives in video gaming, managing to balance heart, hope, tragedy and real-life history all at the same time, and present a truly engaging, memorable story that is likely to stick with anyone who plays it. Number 7. Her Story. For a time in the 90s, it seems like almost every game was trying to incorporate live footage, despite it almost never ending well. This trend ended up dying off, but more recently it has started to pop back up in newer games, with much better results overall. One game that uses live action footage to its full potential is the crime drama that is Her Story. The main goal is relatively simple: sort through all the interviews and find out what happened. These all focus on a woman named Hannah and the fate of her husband, Simon. But you can't just sit back and watch the interviews as they are, because they've been divvied up into shorter clips, and the player has to pick through them and discover connections for themselves. With the game being so short, and unravelling the mystery being so central to the overall experience, there's not too much specific detail we can go into. The fun of a whodunit is to find out who done it for yourself after all, and we wouldn't want to take that experience away from you. The whole game is only about 2 hours long though, so if you have some spare time, just go and sort things out for yourself. We know you can do it. Number 6, Gris. Right, that's quite enough live action, thank you very much. So let's move on to the beautiful pastel world of Gris instead. The game follows a girl named Gris who awakens to find herself in the hands of a statue. Unfortunately, when she tries to call out for help, the hand unceremoniously crumbles and drops her down to the ground, and she finds that the world around her has been stripped of all of its colour. As she explores, she encounters a few structures housing a strange light before finally coming to a crossroad, which opens up 4 different pathways to new areas. She must then travel each of these new paths in order to collect the special lights they hold, which grant her new abilities, as well as restoring a bit of colour to the world around her. This will eventually allow her to move on to whatever is next, but not without making her way past one last hurdle. Though its runtime only clocks in at about 3.5 hours, Gris still manages to deliver a gorgeous and touching story with themes of sorrow, loss, and acceptance wrapped in some of the most beautiful visuals in all of gaming. Number 5, The Vanishing of Ethan Carter. It's time to step into our detective shoes once again, but this time around, things are going to be a bit more X-Files than true crime documentary. Things have already gone rather wrong in the world of The Vanishing of Ethan Carter by the time Detective Paul Prospero shows up, searching for the titular missing boy after receiving his letter. Everything in the area seems to have been abandoned for quite some time, with the potential exception of some seemingly supernatural entities, and it's quite clear from all the rusted equipment left behind that something unpleasant has happened in the nearby mine. The more the detective explores and investigates, the darker the secrets that will be unearthed about Ethan, his family, the area, and the malevolent spirits that seem to have been left behind. Though many would brand it as horror, it's not really a horror game in the traditional sense. While there may be a few jump scares here and there, the supernatural elements are generally non-threatening, and players will need to ascertain the significance of their presence through exploration. What is the real story? Well, you just have to play it to find out, won't you? Number 4, A Short Hike. Sometimes games have extremely complicated rules and tasks that feel like they could take a lifetime to understand. Other times they can seem almost too simple, and this is one of those cases. All the players need to do is guide the bird protagonist Claire to the top of Hawk Peak, which is not very far away at all. It can certainly be a short hike indeed, if that is all players do. Hike their way to the peak without taking the time to journey off the beaten path and explore a bit. However, there is plenty to be seen on the mountain if players don't go as the crow flies. Or hikes, I guess, in this case. There are numerous NPCs to meet along the way, and while some of them simply provide a distracting mini-game to be getting on with, others are having their own personal crises and doubts. The player can help them out with their problems and offer guidance and support if they choose, leading to some heartwarming interactions. Once finally reaching her destination though, Claire has a moment of genuine heartfelt emotion, finally getting a bit of closure for something she's clearly spent a long time avoiding, especially if she did take all of those detours on her hike. Number 3, To the Moon. From the start, To the Moon presents itself as a potentially very heavy narrative, as the story is about 2 doctors working through their patient Johnny's memories in order to fulfill his dying wishes. This on its own is a moving premise, but the way it all unfolds is where the game truly shines. It's not quite as straightforward as going back through the patient's memories like they usually do, because something goes wrong when the doctors are initially trying to insert false recollections of space travel. As such, they're required to sort through some memories from his childhood in order to find out what happened. This leads them to both learn about his past, his life, previous medical procedures, and most importantly, why he wanted to go to the moon so badly in the first place, something Johnny's brain was hiding away, even from him, for all this time. If you're in the mood for something that's somehow simultaneously heartwarming and melancholic, and which will almost certainly make you cry by the end, To the Moon is a beautiful way to explore the importance of memories and the concept of morality. Number 2, What Remains of Edith Finch. Though some like to disparage narrative-driven games for their perceived lack of interactivity, What Remains of Edith Finch is easily one of the best out there, with gripping stories and ever-changing gameplay showing just how great the genre can really be. The story follows the eponymous Edith as she returns to her family home after many years away. Edith, now being the last remaining member of the Finch family, explores and digs into the history of those who came before her and how they met their demise.
Just focus on the camera. Try not to think about...
Dad! Just the way he took a picture. Just the way it took a picture as he got yeeted off the cliff.
Each family member's story is presented slightly differently, depending on whose backstory is being explored, with elements of real-life experience and fanciful elements that can call into question just how real these accounts are, and how much of it is years of embellishment. Ultimately, how much of the story is meant to be real, and how much is pure symbolism, is primarily left up to Edith and the player to decide for themselves. But each self-contained narrative tells a tragic tale, all its own no matter how it's interpreted, with some, especially those of younger family members, hitting especially hard. Even though players only spend a small amount of time with each member of the Finch family, each of them is highly memorable, and their stories paint a beautiful portrait of a troubled family. And number 1, Papers, Please. Our last few titles offer players quite an emotional time, but they're not exactly what you'd call stressful games. Papers, Please has it all though, with a tense emotional story and high stakes that make it an anxiety-inducing but strangely satisfying experience. Players take on the role of an immigration inspector along the border of the fictional country of Arstotzka, and must make sure to vet everyone going through the checkpoint, ensuring they are in compliance with the ever-changing rules. These will not only change, but get more invasive and difficult to check as time goes on, and various criminal acts only add further chaos into the mix. A delicate balance has to be struck between following the orders of the government and sticking to one's own morals. The former will provide enough money to make sure the protagonist and his family have enough to survive, but potentially at the cost of some innocent person's life, whereas the latter could cause lack of funds, death of family members, and even potentially being caught in the act by the government. With every decision changing how the story progresses and a multitude of endings to achieve, Papers, Please is much more than a document-checking simulator, and will have players questioning their every move along the way.